Hi everybody, this is Simon Majumdar, the creator and host of the Eat My Globe Food History podcast. Now, those of you who have been listening to the podcast since we began over 2 years ago, nearly 50 episodes so far, will know that we have never sought out sponsorship for the podcast. It's very much been a labour of love. However, along the way, a large number of people have approached us suggesting they would like to support the podcast. And so, we have opened up a page on patreon.com to allow those of you who listen regularly to do just that. Any support we will get will allow us to purchase research materials, buy ingredients for recipes, and maybe, when we can get out and about, to bring you some very special in-the-field reporting. But, and this is really important, this is not just a one-way street. For varying levels of membership of our Patreon club, there will be access to fantastic Eat My Globe swag, including that incredible chopping board so many of you have written to me about, recipes based on historical periods about which we chat each week, video shout-outs, signed pictures, and even along the way some very special episodes just for members. So, if you've enjoyed the episodes of Eat My Globe you've listened to so far, and would like us to make many more into the future, do head over to www.patreon.com/eatmyglobe and consider taking out a membership. Any support will be much appreciated. Remember, that's www.patreon.com/eatmyglobe. So thank you very much. Keep listening. Hey everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Eat My Globe, a podcast about things you didn't know about food. And on this very, very special episode, I am so thrilled to bring in a gentleman who I have known for many, many years, as I know so many of you have, through his work both in the theatre, through his work on television, and of course his work in many, many splendid films. And that is Mr. Lou Diamond Phillips. But I'm going to give just a little personal introduction about how I began to realize just how passionate he was about food. In 2012, I think it was, and Lou will correct me if I'm wrong, when I moved over here from the United Kingdom, I started watching a lot of Food Network as I'd started appearing on a number of shows at that point, things like Iron Chef and not quite Cutthroat Kitchen at that point, but Iron Chef particularly. And I started watching a lot of Food Network shows, and I watched one called Rachel vs. Guy's Celebrity Cook-Off. I think it was the first season, with a very good cast, if I remember rightly, like Taylor Dane and Coolio and Mr. Lou Diamond Phillips, who, of course, I'd known, who I'd seen in many, many films. And I'd also seen playing the King in The King and I on Broadway. Might not have known this. I just reminded my wife that I had done that in 1996, I want to say. Anyway, so I started watching him going, well, who is this guy and why is he here? And throughout the series, I just noticed that not only was this guy, very enthusiastic about food, which is probably why he's on the show, but he was also rather good. And in the finale of this, which if I'm trying to remember rightly again, was against Coolio. So it's a very odd finale. So Lou Diamond Phillips battles Coolio in a Food Network program, only on the Food Network. You'll tell me about this in a moment, Lou. You ended up cooking a dish twice, or a tomato sauce twice, because you were so aggrieved with how it had come up the first time. And I immediately went on Twitter after you won, and I said, this guy could really cook. And you replied just about immediately. And I don't know how you kind of knew me, or it was just maybe I mentioned you in this. And that's how we got to know each other. And we've ended up having drinks together. We've ended up connecting on Food Network. So that was how I got to know that you, Lou Diamond Phillips, not only are enthusiastic about food, but you're really, really good at food. So perhaps before we go on to the challenge and we can tell people why you're here, just tell us about that experience. Tell us about your passion, but also your expertise for food, which is as good as many chefs who I've met.
Incredibly high praise coming from you, Simon, I have to say. I mean, I responded to you immediately because I was already a fan of yours. I honestly, just listening to your critique not only of food, but the creativity that goes behind it, the passion that goes behind it. It's not just technical. It's very much about the love of cooking. And I mean, and I mean, my God, you present quite impressive presence, sir, I must say. And so I was very eager to form that relationship with you, because we have that in common. And what I love and what I so appreciate about your praise is the fact that I'm not a trained chef. I never took a cooking class. All of my food knowledge, all of my ability in the kitchen is learned behavior from a lifetime of cooking. I mean, starting out with my Filipino mother, who taught me a lot when I was younger and would let me cook once a week, and then some of my earlier jobs, down in Corpus Christi, Texas, flipping burgers at Whataburger, or being a breakfast cook at a little tiny surf shop called Jito's on Padre Island, or even being, like the cleanup guy in the kitchen on the base, So, and then as I got to expand my horizons, thank goodness, to this career and eat food, amazing food around the world, and eat in wonderful restaurants, my food knowledge just sort of increased, and I sort of applied it, as I went along. So when Rachel versus Guy came up, that was a dream come true. The big snafu always is the time.
Yes.
That time. I mean, I'm the kind of guy, you get a glass of wine, you cook for 2-3 hours. I've gotten better. I've gotten better at cooking, in a more efficient fashion, but also cleaning as I go, which is something my wife has taught me. I used to be terrible with just a sink full of dirty dishes, before the meal got finished. And so, my culinary journey, continues to this day. And that's why I'm thrilled to be here talking to you.
One of the things I notice is that you are completely kind of what I think is the greatest thing for any chef, and I would call you a chef, is intellectually curious all the time. So whenever you see something, I can always see you reading about it, whether it's food or not related. You are one of those people, I think, just has this level of intellectual curiosity. And I think as a chef, I think that is the greatest ability, and I would put you then in the same link as when I talk about Alton Brown, when I talk about Guy Fieri. They're always looking there, and you see this when you worked with Guy. They're always looking for something new. They're always asking questions. They're always, and I get texts from, whether it's Alton or someone else, going, what do you know about this? Can you tell me something about this? So I find that, and I put you in that link, and I think that's really important. But we did kind of set you up with a challenge here. The reason I got in touch was because last week I did a rather longer kind of essay, as it were, for Eat My Globe on the history of food in cinema. And I think food has developed, or cinema has developed, this ability of showing food to the point now that we have films that are specifically based on food. And I talked about some last week, like Babette's Feast or The Cook, the Thief, His Lover. I talked about some of these amazing films. And I set you a challenge, and you were very kind to join in. So before we go into that, give us some of your kind of thought processes.
It's interesting. The first criteria, and I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's that Maya Angelou, quote, people won't remember what you said, but they will remember how they made you feel, and that when I think of these scenes and why I've, chosen certain scenes or even, complete films, it was because they sort of had emotional resonance with me when I watched them. And when you're talking about food, I think especially, and this is a credit to great directors, you smell it, man. You taste it. It becomes this entirely sensory experience, even while you are watching a movie, and that is the I think great accomplishment of some great directors. It's interesting because I'm developing a project now wherein automatically I'm going, I want to know how that tastes. I want to, there's a cultural component to this project that I might direct, where it's like, I've got to get that right. I've got to put somebody who's never been to this place in that place, to where even if they've never tasted something like this, they think they can smell it. They think they can, experience it. And maybe, it'll prompt them to go and do that. So that was, my first thought when I started thinking about what had an effect on me when watching some of these films.
I think that's really, really vital part of it. And even I will say in films that I don't particularly like, and I say this about Babette's Feast, I said while I was doing the episode on it that I fast forward to the food scenes. And I will often watch it just to go to the food scenes, which are remarkable, whereas the rest of the film sends me to sleep probably quicker than an Ambien. So but the food scenes are incredible. And I think often there are so many of these, but hopefully with a lot of what we're going to talk about now, these are films that people might want to watch the whole way through if they haven't seen them already. So let's start. And I know, looking at the list that you've sent me, and I've got some challenges along the way, because I think you've made some very good choices. Some I might question where you came at them from. But what are your first choice? What's choice number one?
The Godfather, and that's 1 and 2, to be honest. Which is, that's one of my top 3 favorite films, and I put them together as one film always in my mind. And I remember it because I saw when I was very young. One of the first things that, one of the scenes that just so many other scenes, resonate with other people. But it was Clemenza when they decided to go to the mattresses, when they were at war with the other families. Clemenza's teaching Michael how to make sauce,
Yes.
Or gravy, as a lot of the Italians would say. And it's like, wow, of course. There's the old phrase, an army, marches on its stomach, and so you got to feed people. And it's like, it's so basic. There's this massive competition among the families. It's a life and death situation. But here's one of the most important things, man. Let me teach you how to make some sauce, And he's putting in the sausage, and he's putting in the meats, and he talked about, cooking the tomatoes down, making the sauce from scratch. And you mentioned Scott Conant before we were on the air. I now make my own, tomato sauce, thanks to Scott Conant. I discovered how to do that, and what's interesting too about that is how it's layered in throughout, the second film. And the funny thing is Bruno Kirby, who I loved and I knew the man, what a wonderful, wonderful man. In almost every scene you see Bruno Kirby in The Godfather 2, he's eating. and it's because it's like, oh, this is how thin Bruno Kirby becomes fat Clemenza in the first one, because it's a prequel, because he's always eating a sausage sandwich, or you see him having, spaghetti over at, Don Corleone's, home when they're younger. And so there's this through line, they're always gathering around the table and Mama's always cooking.
And also, the number of references, the ones that, people sort of, grab the cannoli and all of this that we get. Grab the cannoli. So I'm gonna throw out a challenge here, or not even a challenge. I want to ask you, because maybe I'm one of the few in the world who doesn't hate Godfather 3.
I never saw it because I was the first 2 are so perfect in my mind. I never watched the third one. I thought, oh God, I don't want this to sort of taint my memory. Well, I may be wrong. Maybe I should go back and look at it.
So the reason I'm going to say it, particularly with food, there is a scene in Godfather 3, and it features the much maligned at that point, although she's become very respected as a director, Sofia Coppola, with Vincent, the character, and he is teaching her after their parents had been threatened in a battle. He's teaching her how to make gnocchi. And I guarantee you, it is one of the sexiest scenes ever seen in the cinema. And so if nothing else, if you get the chance, go and I'm sure it's all on YouTube. Go and have a look at this scene of this rather handsome, mobster teaching this kind of slightly inexperienced woman who comes from the family, being shown how to make gnocchi. And even just for that, if you watch nothing else of that film, but I'm a great believer that a lot of it has a lot of, for example, I really enjoy kind of the Pacino coming out, trying to get out, and they drag me back in. There's a lot of elements of it that I think are worthwhile. But that scene with gnocchi would have been, and I would have chosen it if it had been me. I would have put that as one of my number ones for this. So that was not my question, because obviously you haven't seen it. But I'd love to know, and we can share this thought on Twitter, if you go and watch it, and tell me what you think of it, because I think it fits in to that whole food. And for me, interestingly, I think loyalty, all the different aspects of The Godfather that flow through it, food is the prism that brings this whole film together, and brings Godfather 3, as I said, too much maligned in my view, back into the family. So I'd love to know, if you go and watch it and go and see it, I think you'd enjoy it.
I will accept that mission, sir.
Excellent. Now, we're not going to have any arguments about your second choice, because I think it's probably up there with my favorite of all, and in fact was on my list of the top 5 that I talked about last week. So tell everyone what your second choice is.
Well, Big Night. I mean, just charming and beautiful and vital throughout. You know, it's just so difficult to pick a favorite scene in that, you know.
Could you, sorry to interrupt, could you tell everyone who might not know, and if they're a food fan, again, you should definitely go out and watch this, because I think it's could you tell them what The Big Night is? Because some people may not know it.
Well, they need to. It's a beautiful independent film. Stanley Tucci and Tony Shalhoub are brothers, Primo and Secondo. They have a little Italian restaurant. It escapes me. Is it in the Queens? Or is it?
It's in New Jersey.
It's in New Jersey. Okay, I thought it was in one of the 5 boroughs. So Tucci, who just won the Emmy, for touring Italy. I mean, hey, nice gig if you can get it.
Absolutely.
All right. He's the maitre d' and he's the business mind. And Tony Shalhoub, who I adore, is the artist. He's the chef. He's the reason, that this restaurant exists, and he is the conduit to the old recipes, to their family, to their continuity, and that in itself is the metaphor of the film. But they're being overwhelmed by this restaurant across the street, that is Americanizing, all of these Italian recipes. I mean, I love the one scene where this woman asks, she gets her plate of spaghetti. She goes, "Well, where's the meatballs?"
Yes.
Tucci has to say, "Sometimes the spaghetti likes to be alone." It's just brilliant stuff. And it's actually Louis Prima.
Yes.
They I can't remember. They somehow Louis Prima is going to show up at the restaurant, and if they can give him a meal that he'll never forget, a meal of a lifetime, then he'll talk about the restaurant and they'll become a success. So they're putting everything, all of their money. They're about to go under. They're putting all of their energy into this big night where this man could potentially save their restaurants, and Isabella Rossellini, who is the wife of their competitor, is helping them get this, to happen. It's just beautiful. And there's cooking all along the way, but it's very much about the purity. Yeah. And it translates to art, to being an amazing painter or a sculptor or a dancer or a writer, whatever. It's like, I cannot compromise my art for the sake of commerce, and that is I think the overriding theme, to all of this, and it's just an amazing piece of work. And now knowing, both Stanley and Tony, it's so evident that they cook. It is so evident that they are both chefs.
Well, the screenplay, wasn't that Stanley Tucci's screenplay that they used for this, or I think it might have been. Yes. I think it might have come from that. And for me, it builds up. It builds up from that quiet desperation at the beginning where he talks to the lady who wants meatballs, and he goes, "We'll make this, we could make this, but it might take 30 minutes." And they're screaming if they don't get the food in front of them because of the kind of more Americanized. And I want to say here, just in case people kind of get angry about it, I love Americanized Italian food. I treat it as a separate cuisine. And one of my very good friends on Food Network, who I'm sure you will know, Antonio Lafaso, has an amazing restaurant in LA called Scopa. which specializes in doing just extraordinarily beautiful Americanized Italian food with such passion and joy. So I'm not criticizing American Italian food. What I'm saying is the authenticity of this food all the way through this film, I think, is incredible, to the point where at the end of it, where they're making the big pasta pie that they bring out. And to me, that's the moment, and you said it, that's the moment where food goes from being a craft to an art. And when they're carrying out that almost a sculpture to Italian cuisine, to me, I still get shivers when I watch that. I get goosebumps. And I obviously am not fortunate enough to know them. I wish I could, just to talk to them about their thought process. But that whole moment, despite the defeat, because, without giving spoilers away, of things that happened during it, that the joy of what they achieved during that meal, they don't seem unhappy.
No. It's interesting. The scene that I always go to, and I look at this not only as someone who cooks, but as an actor. It's the next morning. There's one take. It's one take. It's a wide shot. They never cut in for coverage. And in that one take, the empty kitchen, Shaloub walks in, cracks a bunch of eggs into a bowl. He whisks them up. He makes the most simple, most beautiful sort of egg omelet right there in one shot, finishes it, put a little olive oil in the pan, finishes the egg, cuts it into 3 pieces for himself, the brother, and the sous chef. And they sit down and they have, the omelet. And it's all in one take. It's like a 2-3 minute take. That's amazing, where he does this from start to finish, and not only as a cook, but as an actor. I'm going, oh God, if I screw this up, there's no coverage. You can't use the take. You got to keep it perfect from top to bottom.
I love that. And I think I watch it very regularly, that film. I'm going to have to go and watch it again, because every time there's something in it. It's like the food version of Spinal Tap. Every time I watch it, there's something in it you see that you go, I didn't even remember that. So fantastic. Well, no arguments about that. I think Big Night, definitely in there. Godfather, of course, is in there, but I'm urging you to go and watch Godfather 3. The next one's a film that I actually don't like at all. And I'm going to have a chat with you about this one. So come on. So tell us what number 3 is, and then we can have a little bit of an argument. He says, rubbing his hands.
Oh
together.
No, we're not going to have an argument. I put it on there because it's a food movie, not because it's one of my favorites. I say that right now.
Well, good. Well, that's good. So tell me what you've put on there as number 3, and tell everyone about.
It's Chef, yes?
Yes. So tell everyone about this film if they haven't seen it already, and then we'll have a chat about it, because it's one that annoys me a little bit.
I agree. Absolutely, I agree. It's Jon Favreau. It's what is interesting about it is that it's I don't know. It has the whiff of a vanity project.
Yes, yes.
And it's Jon Favreau, who obviously, very, very powerful guy in Hollywood, so I'll probably never get to work for him, but hey, he's never hired me for Spider-Man anyway. I have a feeling that he took a lot of classes and everything else, and obviously he's a very powerful, very wealthy guy, but I mean his knife skills in that, I went, oh my God, okay. He cuts a zucchini, and I know that needs to be on, the Food Network, because I think it's a passion of his. I think it's certainly something that, he does well, but the story in and of itself of a restaurateur, once again, who fancies himself to be an auteur, an artist, and then ends up, losing his restaurant and going the food truck route. And I think that the plot in and of itself is a bit formulaic. But I did do it because it does have some lovely scenes of him cooking, which he does well.
I think one of the problems I have with this as a film is one of the things I dislike about certain chefs, and I'm not going to name any names here, although I could easily pull out a list, is when they take themselves I absolutely take your craft seriously, absolutely take what you do seriously, but I don't like it when they take themselves seriously. So now I think we've jumped on Jon Favreau. Not that he ever needs to be. And I just want to put another shout out here. Not that it has any relevance to what we're talking about now. Of all your many roles that I have loved over the years, long before we even got to talk, Longmire was one of my favorites, and I just want to say that was one of my greats. You did about 6 seasons, I think, in the end, or maybe, yes. And absolutely loved that. And more recently, I was most distraught about Prodigal Son, which I absolutely loved, and was just a
yeah. I'm still befuddled by that. I'm still flabbergasted at how they canceled us. I mean, not only do we have an amazing following here, and they did not adjust their metric, for COVID or anything else. To say, oh my gosh, it's expensive. Well, yeah, we added $20 million to keep everybody safe and healthy, and yet you wanted a product during that time. So they can't hold, us going over budget against us. Not to mention the fact that the film, the series is a hit in the UK, it's a hit in Spain, it's a hit in Australia. It's like, it seems very short-sighted to me to, not let us, sit in the oven a little bit longer. You know what I mean?
And what a cast.
Amazing cast, ridiculous writers. I got to direct one as well.
Oh, wow.
And just punished for being unlike anything else on television.
Yes.
It's beyond me. It's really beyond me, because I thought that for what it was trying to do, it was fast approaching perfection.
It was. We loved it. We watched it all the time, and particularly scenes with everybody, but when you and two of my favorite people on you and Michael Sheen just spending time together, and he's just brilliant, and I love watching that. And this has got nothing to do with food or with films with food in it, but it's my podcast, and if I want to shout about Prodigal Son being taken off air, then I am going to do it on my podcast. So I just want to. Yes. But now we're going to hit the next one. The next one is, well, first of all, I'd seen this film, but I'm not going to lie, I hadn't seen this film for many years, because I think it's mid 80s.
97.
Oh, okay, maybe I'm getting confused. So 97, and you've chosen it, and it's got you in it. So I'm
speaking of self-serving. No, and I'm guilty of this too. So there you go.
Just chose one with you in it. But what I have to say, I went and watched it, and it's really fun.
It's ridiculous. It is so over the top. I've had the good fortune a couple of times of being in projects, not to pat myself on the back, but they were ahead of the curve, that were ahead of their own time. I did a series called Wolf Lake, which sadly enough was supposed to have premiered September 12th, 2001. Obviously, we know that date in history, and not to trivialize world events, but a werewolf television series was not on anybody's comfort list at the time. So the series failed, although it was quite good, and once again a ridiculous cast. But
so tell us about this film, because we haven't mentioned its name yet.
No, so that was 3 or 4 years ahead of Twilight, so ahead of its time. The big hit is a hip-hop, black comedy, Hong Kong action movie.
Fantastic.
And that mashup was an absolute overwhelming kaleidoscope of styles and tone, and I don't know if the mainstream audience was quite ready for it, although the movie opened up at number 1. And it's myself and Mark Wahlberg before he became such a major star. It was really one of those moments in his transition, and was directed by Che Kirk Wong, who was John Woo produced it. Yep. This was before Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, before sort of hip hop had kind of come into the mainstream. So we were ahead in so many ways, and it's one of my favorite films of mine, and one of my favorite roles of mine, because it is so over the top. It is so. I mean, Kirk Wong just said, "Look, go." He let me improv, and just not everything made the movie, because some of it was just ridiculous. But it's one of the silliest characters I've ever played, but one of the most fun. and one of the most clever films. Not for everybody, but it's it is a lot of fun. And there is a scene, and this is only one scene, where Mark Wahlberg is we've kidnapped China Chow, who is the daughter of our bosses, our Godfather bosses, played by Avery Brooks. Sab Shimono is his best friend. He's the Godfather. We're not very smart hitmen. We're trying to make some money, so we've kidnapped the goddaughter of our boss without knowing that it was the goddaughter of our boss, and he is meanwhile engaged to Christina Applegate, again, amazing,
incredible,
whose parents are Elliot Gould and Lainey Kazan, and he's offered to cook them a kosher meal. So he unties his the hostage. He sent the family off for the afternoon, and they're going to cook a kosher meal. And they're in the kitchen trying to cook this kosher meal. And there is basically a foreplay scene, a love scene, where they're rubbing this chicken down, this raw chicken with butter, and it is so blatantly, like everything else in the movie, sexual and over the top, and these lingering looks. It reminded me of Tom Jones from the 60s, and how when they're eating at the dinner table, that the actual act of eating becomes foreplay. This food preparation was that for me. So I kind of put it on there because I've never been so guilty at laughing so hard at a scene.
Although I'm gonna my only kind of upset about this. No, I think the food scene is absolutely fantastic. And one of the things that it does, sometimes when people describe food as sexy, we kind of roll our eyes and go, oh yeah, because we do. But in this, it is actually very, because it's directly meant to be sexual.
Yes.
I mean, nobody's hiding the fact that it's not, it's a little bit like, it's absolutely like.
When he's seasoning the cavity, it's like, hello, I don't know if I should be watching this.
Yeah, so definitely if you're watching it with children, just be careful, because they might ask you a few questions on that particular scene. I remember when I was watching it again. But the other side is, and this maybe is just because we've got to know each other, you don't come to a good end, and that's not a spoiler because people go off and I was like, oh, he's basically chosen a film in which he dies. I was like, in a not terribly nice way, if I remember rightly.
It's after a really great fight, and then an explosion. So, but I mean, the funny thing is, we actually talked about a sequel for a little bit with the same cast, and I mean, as you recall, I think I survived death a couple of times. In the film, it wouldn't have been too difficult, given the tone of it all, for me to come back. Or be my even more evil twin brother, which would have been fine. Although I have to note that a lot of times, in movies where I die, they're hits. Or if I get the crap kicked out of me, they're also hits. So that says a lot about my fan base.
They just like to see. They like to see you suffer. That's so funny. I hadn't thought about this. I'm going to go and have to watch loads of those. Well, you know what? A, because it's you, and B, because I've been a fan of yours for such a long time. I think that's absolutely fine. And it is a really, really fantastic food scene in a film that has nothing else to do with food at all. And actually, that's fine too. One of the ones that I mentioned last week was Laurel and Hardy, who I adore. And in fact, one of the first things I asked Sybil to do when I moved over here from the UK, the very first thing I asked her to do was to drive me up to Silver Lake so I could go and stand on the steps of the music box where they push the piano. And I just said, before I do anything else in Los Angeles, I have to go on those. But there was one where where Oliver Hardy is in the hospital and Stanley comes to visit him. And he goes, and it's just the line that has become associated with him. He goes, I brought you some hard-boiled eggs and nuts. And the whole thing, the whole show, the whole short is about them trying to eat these hard-boiled eggs and nuts while Oliver's in this pulley system for his broken leg. And you can imagine the kind of chaos that ensues. But it's just hard-boiled eggs and nuts has become it. And so, but it's almost got nothing to do with the food. It's just the chaos that arrives around it. So
it puts me in mind... Is it Laurel and Hardy with the grapefruit eating scene, or is it the Three Stooges? Because there's a grapefruit eating scene where the person eating it keeps getting squirted in the eye, and it's hilarious.
I think that is the Three Stooges. But Laurel and Hardy had so much with. We're just chatting now, which is great because But one of my other favorites is Laurel and Hardy, where they have no money apart from enough to buy 1 pint of beer. And they go, we'll drink 1/2 each. And Stan Laurel drinks it all. And Oliver Hardy goes, why did you drink it all? He goes, my half was on the bottom. And it's just so beautifully done. And it's Stan Laurel, and it's, and so when you see these scenes, and I talked about Chaplin with the bread rolls and eating the boot, which was apparently made of licorice in the great the Gold Rush, and you see just the impact of food through history. So I think it's absolutely fine to have something where it's just certain scenes in films that aren't necessarily food films as well. But I think for your last film, we're going a little short here. This of all of many, and I actually, I'm going to just share with everyone. It's an animation, and for me, I mentioned one of my favorite food films, and a lot of chefs will tell you if you want to know what food looks like in a kitchen or what preparing food, they always say go and watch Ratatouille. I
was just going to say that. Amazing! I should have put that on the list.
Well, I mentioned it last week. I
like it much more than Chef.
Absolutely. I would rather watch Ratatouille than Chef. But what I love about the animation, the way they bring that emotion into it, and this is the nature of, I always say food can save a life. It actually saved my life, and that's a long story that I'll share for another time, but it literally saved my life when I was having a very dark time. And the film that you're going to choose, and I'll let you mention it, is all about food saving a life, I think. And I think that's what food can do, and how you can achieve that in a short animation is extraordinary to me. So please tell us a little bit about your final choice. I don't know. I was just so struck by this short film for so many reasons. It's called Bao, B-A-O, Bao. The little dumplings. And it's charming. It's metaphorical. I don't know. It's only a couple of years old. It was nominated, I believe, for the Oscar. I don't know if it won it or not, but it just brought in so many things. We've talked about tradition. We talked about and this is an Asian mom. And so this little short film, is about the traditions of bringing your food, your culture to America, and the little Bao becomes a little boy, and this is metaphorical. She raises it, and then it leaves her. It's just heartbreaking. But it has a happy ending. I'm not gonna spoil anything. But it also comes from the fact that the little Bao falls in love with a white girl. Which is it's just so funny because I'm half half Filipino, half Caucasian. My children got all my white genes. I have 4 daughters, and they're all little pale English looking princesses. And it's that thing, man. It's that the diversity and the sort of hybrid generation that we've created. And how do you hold on to your traditions? How do you hold on to, your roots in a country that's moving forward and redefining itself? And what's so bizarre to me is that we're seeing either the embrace of that or the rejection of that in America now. Absolutely.
And it brought this short little film brought so many big questions to mind, and so many of them inspire an emotional reaction. It's really, really a lovely piece. Not to mention the fact that we are now seeing more content that is cultural. That comes from the Asian community, that comes from the Latino community, that comes from the African American community. We are seeing an industry that is transitioning to be more inclusive, and I thought that this film is a beautiful example of that.
Well, I think for the fact in such a short space of time, the fact that the amount that it achieves, and it really did to me, and you mentioned it perfectly. One of the things I think about a lot is being half British, an American citizen, but half Bengali. And I go, well, what's my cultural identity? And a lot of people, who have come from, as you do, from mixed backgrounds, really struggle because people say to me, and I get this all the time, people say to me, well, what, you can't cook Indian food because you're not Indian enough. And I get this from people on Twitter all the time. But then people in England go, well, you're not English because look at you, you're kind of swarthy and slightly olive oil skin and all of the rest of it. And so that cultural identity, and to have something in that short a piece of time that addresses that in a very light way, relatively, I mean, although it has some unhappiness in it, I thought was really remarkable. And when I saw this on there, Ratatouille would have been a great choice. But actually, this very short space of time to achieve something that is actually quite brilliant, I thought was really important. And I love watching that film. And it's one of those, that you could only get in animation, like watching Up, like watching, things that I like watching Ratatouille, the conversations that you can almost get away with by having non-people say them to each other.
We have literally told our 13-year-old girl, who has got an amazing palate, by the way. She doesn't like grilled cheese, but she likes raw squid. You know what I mean?
Fantastic.
Her Asian roots, But I mean, there's so many times when we put a ratatouille, don't just hork it down, taste it, appreciate the flavors, appreciate the combination of things, It's just.
We're seeing. I think we're seeing a lot of that now, and I am, just to throw this in before we go and talk about how people can catch up with you on social media and everything. I honestly believe with the immigration we have in the United States right now, we're reaching a golden age of our food. I say this all the time. I think we're getting second and third generation people from different communities all over the world. We're in the United States, and they are bringing their culinary traditions into the American vernacular. So, I could go out to any supermarket now and buy gochujang. I could go out to, any supermarket now, and probably they'll have frozen bao in the freezer section.
Lemongrass
in not particularly high-end supermarkets.
Huh.
And I really believe we're at a really great opportunity here because we're being informed, if we allow ourselves to be informed, and that's a different question, by so many incredible people from all over the world. And I meet them as I'm traveling.
I've had a project in mind for a long time. You and I need to talk.
Any time. It's always a joy to talk to you. And then that's a good segue, he says, that if other people want to talk to you, and one of the things I will notice, for some reason I noticed today, I don't follow you on Instagram. I have to go and sort that out.
I'm not on Instagram.
Oh, well, then that's why I'm not following you on Instagram.
No, the only social media I am on is Twitter, and it's Lou D. Phillips, Loud Phillips. I got the blue check mark. And, no publicist, no assistant, none of that. It is 100% me. Those are my cats. Those are my recipes. Those are my pictures, that either I take or my wife takes. Yvonne, and it's a direct conduit to me.
And it is one of the reasons why I really love you on Twitter so much, is because I'm the same. But my people is sometimes my lovely wife, who will put something on if I'm running around, but it's me, and I answer, and if people ask me questions, and I make a real serious point of going, no, it's me. If you ask me a question about how to prepare a dish or how to do something, it's me. And for good, bad, or worse, it's me. And you do that. And to have access to someone like you, and you're very good at responding. So say that again, the link for you.
It's at Lou D. Phillips, Loud Phillips, capital L-O-U, capital D, capital P-H-I-L-L-I-P-S.
So make sure, if you're listening, folks, go and connect with Lou on there, and go and talk about food, because I know he genuinely, you get very excited. You can see I can imagine you kind of tapping on the keyboard in excitement when you're talking.
I do. And the one question that I sort of I love and I hate is, if I'll post what I've done for dinner, they'll ask for the recipe. It's like, I can't do it in 240 characters, man. Sorry. And I hate, I have to admit, I hate these 3, 4, 5, 6 thread things, No,
I can't do that. What I do is I always go, well, I'm going to go and put it on my website and then send people. I just did one yesterday on TikTok, of all things. I can't imagine me on TikTok, but there you go. But I go and I did a baigan bata, the roast eggplant from India. And we got so many likes, and people go, where's the recipe? So I'm giving Sybil the recipe, and we'll put it on my website. Nice. But what we always like to do, and again, I know you've got to go off and be, however many amazing TV series and films you've got planned. We always like to end with just some silly questions. So do you have time to answer some
I do. Of course
silly questions for us that we like to do with anyone who comes on? So let's think about this. If you were a meal, if you had to describe yourself as a meal, how would you describe yourself?
I'm going to go with my favorite meal, of all time, which is steak and lobster or steak and crab legs. A little surf and turf, as Bobby De Niro said in Midnight Run.
I love that film. I love that film.
I love that film too. Got a class of people up here. You're a class. Probably all embezzlers. But it's just being born in the Philippines, getting raised in Texas, it's got that beef and seafood. It's comfort food, which I like to think of myself as a little bit. But there's a certain elevation to it. I think it's got a certain amount of class to it, it's very satisfying and yet not something that you're going to get every day.
What kind of steak would it be? That'll be my only question.
Oh wow, that's just I used to say that the ribeye, because it's so marbled, is my favorite cut. But I've been trying to be a little bit a little less luxurious, I guess. But I've grown very fond of the New York strip.
Okay,
just a little smaller, a little leaner. Strangely enough, I'm not a huge fan of filet.
No, I get into a lot of arguments because I always do, when I do my talks, I always go that you should throw away filet mignon, pork tenderloin, and chicken breast, because you might as well eat like Chaplin's shoe from the Gold Rush, because you'll have as much flavor. So that's a good answer. Ribeye to me is the perfect. Okay, my next, if you could go to any period in history, any period, and it could be anything, or a meal from any period in history that you wanted to sit at and experience it for the first time, or to see what it was really like, what would it be?
I went immediately to the first Thanksgiving. Interestingly enough, the first time that I judged on Iron Chef was a Thanksgiving challenge. And it was amazing because it was Bobby Flay and Michael Simon versus Kat, Cora, and Morimoto.
Wow.
And Morimoto, even though they lost by just a little bit, brought a different perspective to it, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, one of the things that he did was that he basically grilled the giblets on skewers, which was just delicious and straight ahead and wonderful. Yeah, just unbelievable. But it makes me think, and then lobster. Lobster was part of the first, Thanksgiving too. That not many people sort of, acknowledge that. And so, not only am I interested in it from an historical standpoint and how they prepared all of these foods, and the presentation of them all, but once again, the fusion of two cultures and how they came together
Very
over
much.
the table, and what were the dynamics really? You know what I mean? Was it this sort of all-encompassing, we welcome you to our table because you basically saved our lives, and what was, what was really, the interpersonal, relationships, that were going on around that table, and did they put their differences aside, at that moment? Was there a Christian prayer? And then was there a blessing from one of the shaman? I mean, all of that kind of comes into mind when I think of the first Thanksgiving, and not just a turkey and stuffing and how we come to view it today.
Well, it has a lot of history. I actually did a show for the Food Network or the Cooking Channel, I can't remember which now, called Back in Time for Thanksgiving, where we went back in time. We actually filmed it at what was then Plymouth Plantation.
Right.
It's now I think called Plymouth, Massachusetts. But so where they have the Living Museum. So I worked with the Wampanoag culinary people I worked with. No, it was really fantastic. Odd things that come out of it, like they did play a game of football at the very first Thanksgiving, which was a version of this very rough game. They had me play it, and I was beaten from pillar to post by a very large gentleman from the Wampanoag community. Wonderful, wonderful. I had such a good time. But they did have obviously there was no turkey there at this point, but they did have a lot of game because one of the things that was really important for American identity from the very beginning was obviously you couldn't hunt in England because all the land was owned by the rich people. If you hunted, you were poached and you were executed. But in America, from the very beginning, they were allowed to hunt. During the 2008 crash, I had people in Kansas City who would go out hunting because it's the only way they could put food on the table. So it's still even more. And so it was really fascinating. And the way they talk about it was there was this very brief period where there was a kind of symbiotic kind of thing between the Wampanoag communities and this. It changed very quickly, but there was a brief period. So maybe it would have been the kind of that brief window, I think. Okay, I think that's a great answer. And particularly when you give it that kind of that rationale and just trying to see how this country was formed. And the last one, and I always ask this, and we've had people saying all kinds of different answers. If you had to choose anything from history, food history, or history generally, that you would say was the greatest invention for food, what would it be?
Yeah, I feel like such a for saying this, because it's just like I don't have yours or Alton Brown's sort of food knowledge or even culinary knowledge. Because I've never been trained. And it's like, wow, what made a difference? I mean, well, you got fire, you've got, all of these sort of things. I've got the little things that I use. But when I sit there and think, what actually changed the ability to affect techniques? I thought a blender or a food processor, because it's so minimized the amount of time that you had to do something. I mean, if you were going to make a soup out of it and you had to cook it down, you had to just spend so much time either roasting it or cooking it, or your knife skills. If you're going to do something, you could spend a long time mincing up a lot of stuff. If that's the effect that you want. And I just thought the ability to mechanize that would help a lot of recipes and a lot of different techniques.
I like that, because the reason I thought it was such a good idea is one of the very first blenders, and I can't remember, or grinders, or all of the things that were going on, was described in the 1920s or even early as your servant at home. So what it actually talked about was how richer households or even middle-class households were changing. People didn't have a live-in cook. They were having to prepare. So this was taking the place of a group, a community. And we're talking now about, are we going to lose a lot of our work to technology? We've had this all throughout history, of course. And so even things like that were seen as threatening by many people who were in that community of, kind of social, like the Downton Abbey crowd or whatever it was. Yeah. They were seen as threatening, and the cooks go, well, we can't use this. This is not the way to do it. And even now, you still get levels with people going, oh, well, chimichurri is much better if it's made in a mortar and pestle than in a blender. So I just thought that was a really good, I think it was a really good answer, because what it does is prompts lots of discussion. It actually made me think of going back and doing an episode. I did an episode on silverware recently, which was fascinating. But maybe going back and looking at grinders, looking at some of these things that we take for granted now, but actually how much they change the way we think about food. And you do a blender cookbook, a grinder cookbook, or whatever cookbook now. And I thought that was a really great answer. First of all, thank you so much for that. Your time is very precious, so I appreciate that you took an hour to spend some time, and I hope you had fun anyway.
I had a blast. I can't wait to do it over a meal again, my friend.
Do make sure to check out the website associated with this podcast at www.eatmyglobe.com, where we will be posting the transcripts from each episode, along with all the references and resources we use putting the episodes together, in case you want to delve deeper into each subject. There is also a contact button, so please do let us know if there are any subjects that you would like us to cover. And if you like what you hear, please don't forget to subscribe, recommend us to your family and friends, and give us a good rating on your favorite podcast provider. That really makes a difference. Thank you, and goodbye from me, Simon Majumdar, and we'll speak to you soon on the next episode of Eat My Globe, a podcast about things you didn't know about food. The Eat My Globe podcast is a production of It's Not Much But It's Ours and Producer Girl Productions, and is created with the kind cooperation of the UCLA Department of History. We would especially like to thank Professor Carla Pastana, the Department Chair of the Department of History, and Dr. Tawny Paul, Public History Initiative Director, for their notes on this episode. Also, a huge thank you to Sybil Villanueva for her help with the research and the preparations of the transcripts for this episode, which can be found on the website.